And also I'm concerned with the impact of lack of rent control.
Welcome to the BTS Presents show.
I'm Brian Schulman, I'm the producer. We're currently doing segments on Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley real estate behind the scenes. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Candace Bradfield, broker and owner of Bradfield & Associates, and past president of our Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors. I want to thank you for joining BTS Presents.
Hi, I'm Datta Khalsa. I am hosting the second half of our installment, a discussion on rent control with our two guests. So good to be here with both of you.
Well, thanks for having us again.
Yeah, so Cynthia, I understand you're one of the authors of the rent control ballot.
Well, we had 4 citizen authors, and we consulted with a team of rent control specialist lawyers also. So, yes.
Okay. How long was it, the process of putting it together?
It took us about 5 months of a lot of long 6-hour meetings to put it together. You
studied a number of other rent control measures. Any particular ones that were of the most influence?
Well, I personally studied a lot, and I wouldn't say the group studied a lot, but we studied different parts of different measures. But I was very interested when rent control passed in 2016 in Richmond and Mountain View, and so I actually went up there and I spoke with those people and I studied theirs because they were the latest iterations of rent control, and I found the Richmond ordinance had a lot of protections that I thought were would be good to include in our law, but we wrote something specifically for our city. It's specific. Every rent control law is different.
Right.
So we wrote one that we felt addressed this particular issues in Santa Cruz, which is one of the most expensive cities with the lowest wages. So we tried to make something to address the issues that come up in that situation.
So yeah, some of the more controversial parts of it center around the just cause eviction portions of the measure. So what was the thinking in including those?
Well, rent control is not worth anything without just cause for eviction, because you can just be rent raised right out of your place, and you can be evicted for no cause in the state of California. So there's no point in going through the process of making a rent control law without just cause for eviction. There's no benefit to the tenant for that.
And what about the paradox of, say, the Ellis Act, where a landlord basically says, well, this isn't making sense for me anymore, so I'm going to withdraw my property from the rental market for 10 years. Do you think there's a potential for consequence of that that's happened in other cities? Do you see that potentially being a problem here?
There are many consequences that can be brought on by the landlord lobby passing laws at the legislative level, because they have a lot of financial, they have a lot of punch at that level. Thank you. And we just are trying to pass laws that are fair for tenants and keep our communities, have a community standard that includes renters and tenants and what's valuable to a community. So we didn't make those laws that are trying to pull rent control apart. Landlords passed the Costa-Hawkins Act and the Ellis Act, and that doesn't mean we're going to stop passing rent control laws because all is lost. We're not going to wring our hands and slink off into the
well, no, it's definitely
Central Valley. We have to fight, and so we will put new things in our laws, and they will pass through the courts, and they will get tighter and tighter, and then landlords will fight back, and so it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, no, I think affordability is definitely a good cause. I mean, I have a lot of friends and even people who are in the real estate industry, because little known fact, probably 10% of the agents make 90% of the income. So you have people in the real estate industry who are often seen as siding with the landlords when many of them are actually tenants. And the real paradox is finding the right mix of how you can control, the basic, outside of a capitalist society, going beyond the basic motivation of being able to afford the high prices of houses, which then trickles down to the rents. And unless you can revoke the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins, which if I understand correctly, were passed in the wake of what happened for the 15 years from 1980 to 1995, where a high number of landlords basically left the business, developers left the business, and no more rental housing was developed. And so rents actually went up. And so in order to bring an incentive for these developers who have no reason to build here aside from if it's going to make them a profit, then they started to come back in 95. So it's such a complex thing. I really admire that you're going out there and doing what you think is going to make a difference. I'm doing the same thing. The fact that we differ on it, that's what makes, this, I hate to say make America great again because that sounds like some else. But what makes Santa Cruz a vital place is that people like you and me can sit down here and say, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And hopefully each of us comes away with something we hadn't thought about.
And hopefully goes home to a place we can actually don't get rented out of.
Yeah, I love that vision because we need people of all shapes, sizes, and all incomes.
But that's not what's happening now. That's the problem.
I know. I'm seeing a big change. So, talk about, if you will, what's your focus?
I was called in at the very last minute, perhaps in desperation because you were going to be late. I'm not sure. But my issue has to do with civil rights for homeless people, and to some extent, services such as emergency shelter and the right to be left alone outside if you haven't got any shelter and you have to shelter yourself, which is a major problem in all kinds of cities up and down across the country and in California, but particularly in Santa Cruz. I mean, I've spent years denouncing the sleeping ban law in Santa Cruz, which is still on the books, which makes it illegal to be asleep after 11 o'clock at night. It's hard to work this into a housing discussion, but that for homeless people, tents are housing. Emergency shelter is housing. And before you came in, our previous host, Brian, I pointed out to him that the city council has got millions of dollars to spend, and it's essentially completely eliminating even the very inadequate winter shelter program it had last winter, and instead making token expansions to programs that you can't use for emergency shelter. Emergency shelter means help, I need some help, let me in. Whereas these programs involve going through a vetting process, have to show you have a pathway to housing. You can't walk in on a cold night and get into these. You get on a waiting list.
Right.
So my interest and my concern has to do with that. And also I'm concerned with the impact of lack of rent control on creating homelessness in Santa Cruz, something that I've been urging rent control advocates to add to their armory, which they are to some extent. They're talking about it. You're likely to end up on the streets. Many people do. Right. It's true, I guess you can move away, but many people, rather than abandon the connections and the community connections that they have, will be homeless in their vehicles. They'll continue working here. And you probably had this experience yourself with people you've known if you've been around here for a while.
People that I've been very close to.
So in that regard, HUFF, Homeless United for Friendship and Freedom, the group I work with, is in solidarity with, if not critical on the left, around rent control. I mean, I'd like to see rent reduction, but right now we're on the bandwagon of being supportive of the rent control measures.
So are you active in San Francisco, for example, as well?
It's very local.
HUFF is a local organization?
Is a purely local Santa Cruz organization.
Because I know San Francisco is one of the first cities to do rent control, and they have, an equally daunting homeless issue. Ideologically, I would love to see something work. The problem that I see with the rent control is I haven't seen it work in other cities, New York City as well. I mean, their homeless shelters are open they're basically filled to capacity and then some. So the solutions I keep reading about have to do with ways of providing. So I think you're on the right path, trying to provide shelters, trying to provide.
See, I think it's
means of
misleading,
creating-
though, to say
Solutions?
Well, they're basically band-aids to a bigger problem. So
Well,
They're not
rent
even
control
band-aids.
isn't meant to address homelessness. It's not meant to address homelessness. That's not what it's about.
okay,
and homelessness is
Rent
not.
control is meant to stabilize rents so that low income, people of color, women, and disabled people and senior citizens can remain in their community.
right.
That's what it's about.
But
That's
it's
specifically
But it's
about
specifically
that.
failed every time. is
That's
the
not
problem.
because of rent control.
Why
That's
is that?
because Costa-Hawkins was put into effect, as well as the Ellis Act. So, you've got your, and I'd like to do a whole other show on this, your data between 1980 and 1995.
Mm-hmm.
There are more sources than the ones you're using. So I think we could use a more full-length discussion. You made you posited some things as facts, but the people who do studies,
Mm-hmm.
those are housed people that have vested interests, and there have never been any studies done from the viewpoint of renters about rent control of any consequence. So you can't name me one. And so
So are you suggesting that if
So
Costa-Hawkins is repealed and Ellis Act is repealed, that'll solve the problems?
No, I'm suggesting that your claim that a lot of rental housing was lost is due to rent control, is not due to rent control. Santa Cruz right now, the market here is more profitable than New York City. I've been talking to real estate agents.
Profitable?
Yes. The
In
market
terms,
here,
in terms of what, cap rate?
people are just buying up like huge amounts of real estate, like for example on Lower Frederick Street in that neighborhood. And so there's really not a problem selling real estate here because the market's very hot.
It's
And
extremely hot for buyers.
Yes,
For buyers, we have
right.
people coming from Silicon Valley with seven-figure incomes.
And those are the people who don't really want rent control here, and they're paying a lot of money out through the California Apartment Association and other groups to make sure that their newly purchased properties, hopefully won't fall under rent control, because a lot of them bought before February 13th and had a plan. And the rent control put a wrench into some of those plans.
Well, I would love to talk
So-
it through further with you, because most of the people from Silicon Valley are buying to occupy, and they're displacing renters.
Well,
And that's-
there's
I think
many.
we
Well,
need
those
to-
are maybe
we
the
need to have
people
ways of constructing
from
more
Silicon Valley.
high-density housing.
But there are people from all over the country buying here. There are large landlords buying here.
Not for profit. No, for
Oh
profit.
yes, for profit. For example,
You don't
Hilltop.
Hilltop.
That used to be. It's over on Western Drive. It used to have a different name for many years, and it's called Hilltop now. It was bought by a Goldman Sachs owned investment company. It's an apartment complex. People are investing here
It's an
because they
apartment
see
complex?
a place for profit.
It's an apartment complex.
It's one of
for
the
rent?
larger apartment complexes in the city, and it's on Western Drive.
Oh, the one at the top of Western there.
Yes.
Okay, I understand
yes.
that.
When
yes.
you claim that rent control doesn't help homelessness, if you look at the increase in homelessness throughout the country, you've got to consider that there are much more basic concerns that impact all of us, having to do with inequality of wealth, the war economy, all kinds of things that are not being addressed, corruption, massive corruption, and corporate power that simply doesn't take into account the concerns of renters, the concerns of poor people, and doesn't create the kinds of services that actually might, and the kinds of housing, as you know, that might create.
Well, I think you've tapped on something, creation of housing being a key one. We have to go to a video right now, but let's talk about that more in terms of solutions where we could add. I would love to see low-income rental, low-income purchasing of housing. I've spoken to several of those people, increasing the supply. And so we'll be back after this video. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Singleton. I'm the campaign director for Santa Cruz Together, and we're here at our campaign kickoff. It's August 22nd. Here about 7 p.m. in Stockwell Cellars. We're excited to be here. We have around 150 people on our side here to celebrate the beginning of this campaign. We're excited because Measure M, we feel, will be dramatically impactful to the local housing market. And renters like myself will be disproportionately harmed given the way the economics are working. So we're happy to be here. We are No One Measure M, and so we are a coalition of local homeowners, renters, students, teachers, from all walks of life who are here measure would ultimately be detrimental to the housing market standards.
What can you say about the people behind you that are in the opposition? What are your concerns about that perspective, or what can you say about the fact that you have another group of people behind you with a different perspective than you have?
You know, I don't have a lot to say. They're entitled to their opinion. I believe their intentions are really good. I think we all want the same thing, which is a Santa Cruz that's affordable for a large collection of people. It's just we disagree about how to get there. And so while they may have disagreements, they're welcome to speak their mind. You know, we're glad that they're passionate and involved in this issue. We look forward to being able to engage in an educational discussion from this point on.
All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Hi, we're here with Keshav Kumar at the Measure M event at Stockwell Cellars.
We are here today because we are standing against the rent control measure that's going to be on the ballot in November, because we think it will be far too costly and far too wasteful to our city. We believe that there are many solutions to finding affordable housing in Santa Cruz, and band-aids like this aren't going to do the trick. We need to make sure that we're working together as a community to create a cohesive solution that actually makes sure that all constituents of the city are served. And so this solution is frustrating to us because it only serves a small minority of people in our city. So I'm standing here as a volunteer and as a canvasser because I do not believe Measure M is the solution.
What do you think about outside of the Santa Cruz County area about the whole issue of rent control nationally or locally?
I think the Stanford study is the only thing I really need to cite here, because it proves, and there are many studies like it, that the city of San Francisco did not benefit from rent control. And the entire economics department at my university, the University of California, Santa Cruz, is against this measure. So there's quite a bit of academic proof that rent control doesn't work. Outside of Santa Cruz, this will be the most extreme version of rent control. And so I don't see this working out any better than it did in the outside cases that we've seen.
What can you say about the people behind you that are protesting your position? Because clearly they have a different perspective than you.
They're passionate individuals who believe that we need a solution to affordable housing to make sure that people can stay in this area. I respect the passion, but at the same time, I do not believe band-aid solutions like Measure M are the solution.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
And a renter here in Santa Cruz. I first became interested in working in politics because of my interest in fairness and human rights, which is something, because I live here in Santa Cruz, California, immediately led me to working on the housing crisis. It is also something that may get you to beg the question of why I'm in here talking to you and not outside. That is because Measure M is not a policy that will help Santa Cruz. It will not help landlords, yes, but it will also not help renters, individuals experiencing homelessness, or do anything to address California's most prevalent issue, the lack of affordable housing.
We've started canvassing early this month. Robert has an excellent team of trained canvassers out there every day. The thing that is fantastic about it is that they are young renters that recognize that this is bad for the future of rental housing in Santa Cruz. So we have young renters canvassing daily. We would like to have additional canvassers. So again, opportunity for everybody to help us out. There'll be a training this weekend at noon at Cruz that Robert
Saturday noon.
Our website traffic doubled in August to about 3,500 unique visitors so far. So the website is doing extremely well. And I want to encourage everybody to realize that part of the way that we're organizing and mobilizing is from the website. So if you have people interested, send them to the website, have them read about it, have them join our email list, and then also on the website you can, people other than you guys who are now know what's going on, they can get a yard sign, they can endorse off the website. So we want people to go there. So it's good to be aware, but I think then they can also be part of the newsletter, figure out what the volunteer opportunities are. So we One of the things that is fantastic about us is we have a really good network effect because we have so many people, and you can all tell your friends, drive them to the website, we're just going to make this thing bigger and bigger.
A lot of people.
You can actually see the data.
Let's hear it. So,
All right, I have to say
This is
goodbye.
oh wait, well, not quite so quick.
I'll give you my card.
So we are back, as you can see, from literally people on the streets over this issue. It is a very hot issue right now, and I really am grateful to our two guest panelists today for sharing their views. Again, while we don't always see eye to eye, I think we all see eye to eye that it is a very clear and real issue. So, Robert, if you want to speak a little bit about just any kind of closing comments regarding where your focus is, what you would like to see ideally happen.
Is this going to be broadcast shortly? What's the broadcast?
Within probably the next 2 weeks.
Well, the concern that a number of us have been working on is reopening facilities that are obviously vital for basic community health, and also for that of people who are disabled, senior, elderly, outside.
And we're talking about the Harvey West facilities?
I'm talking about the Loudon Nelson bathrooms, for example, that's been locked. It's an anti-homeless mentality that goes along with the gentrification process that I think is creating a lot of the problems that this Measure M is trying to at least address in some limited way. The organization I work with, HUFF, Homeless United for Friendship and Freedom, is concerned with restoring civil rights and services to homeless folks, particularly civil rights.
Yeah.
And that's, if people are interested, they can contact the numbers on the screen, 423-HUFF, 423-4833. That's the number to call if you're interested in these issues.
Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
Cynthia, I understand you've got to get to your day job, so to speak.
I
Not
do,
exactly your
yeah.
job,
So
but
sorry I have to leave, but thank you so much for having me.
I would definitely welcome you back anytime. And offline, we're going to share some data. And I think both of us want to make sure that if we're out there being vocal, trying to make a difference, that we're doing it on correct data. So I think that's a wonderful.
That's always a
cause.
good idea. So
Yeah.
I'm with Santa Cruz Tenants Association. I have a website, santacruztenants.weebly.com, and I have an email, santacruztenants@gmail.com, and the Tenants' Rights Hotline is 831-222-0359, and you can find me as a member of the Yes on M campaign coalition. We have a website, Facebook page, just Yes on M in Santa Cruz. You'll find all of our information and volunteer folks.
Great. And I guess just one closing thought. As I understand it, the City Council has a measure, a fallback measure, the 10%, 15% maximum rate increases that will take effect if Measure M doesn't pass. What are your thoughts on
it?
I don't think the final's been drafted yet.
Where did you hear about it?
I've heard about it from David Terrazas, amongst others. They
He's the
do.
mayor.
Yeah, he is the mayor. Well, the outgoing. So any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think that Measure M is going to provide so many more protections that the council measure will pale in comparison, and it will be easily overturned unless it's being underwritten by the California Apartment Association, in which case it's really not any use. So what happens when a city council passes rent control? If it's really rent control, the next day the apartment and the landlord lobby, they hire a company, a lot of times it's from Utah or other states, they come in, they gather signatures, they overturn that however they need to. And so it's pointless, and it can be changed by another administration.
Yeah, this particular one, as I understand it, CAA standards dictate that it's inhumane to raise rents by more than 10%. So it seems to mirror in some ways that. So my hope would be that, and my expectation would be that CAA would actually be okay with this, but I don't know. I'm not on the inside.
Oh,
on
I'm
that
sure
track.
they are. I'm sure they are. But the issue is that the rents are already exorbitant, and people are already paying 75% of their income many times, at least over 50. And so a 10% or a 9% or an 8% or a 7% rent raise is going to evict a lot of people right there. So that's no use at all in the kind of atmosphere we're in, the ambience of rents versus wages here. You just want to kick everybody out who works here and just have people living here who work in Santa Clara County where the wages are 60% more. I don't think we want to do that. So I don't understand, the logic.
The runaway home prices, actually a 10% increase wouldn't keep pace with the amount of increase that there have been in housing prices and in apartment prices.
Well, those people are speculators, so it's going to crash, and that's why there's a run right now, because the housing prices are going down right now a little bit, and things are selling in a shorter time than last year. That tells us something.
Whatever we come up with, hopefully there can be a little bit more supply, and it can be done in a way that doesn't completely change our community that we all love. So thank you.
Yeah, there is more supply when we allow people to bring in their family members. That keeps people off the streets, and that's what Measure M does, too.
Well.
That's
And
one way.
the hope is that we can get some developers excited about this county too, to provide some low-cost housing. So stay tuned,
Right.
and thank you all for joining us. And again, we'll be in touch.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks for watching the BTS Presents show. Material. Okay? So let me tell you a little bit about the show, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing here, and then I'll introduce the show and we'll start from there. Okay? So I'm BTS Presents. I am Brian T. Schulman, and I've been producing television shows here at Santa Cruz County for about 7 or 8 years. I do a half-an-hour show every month, and today we're doing shows on Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley real estate, behind the scenes. Behind the scenes is BTS, which is also my initials. So that's kind of how the foundation of BTS Presents occurred, is to create television shows in the local community and to have a venue for discussing things that are not just in Santa Cruz, but how they affect other areas and how other areas affect Santa Cruz, which is why it's not just Santa Cruz, it's Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley and the relationship between the two. So for the last year, we've been doing shows on housing. Because housing is a big subject nationally and locally, for that matter. So today we're here talking about housing in Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley, and I appreciate both of you being able to be here today.